Good morning, Malta and Gozo, and welcome to another edition of Lovin Daily. My name is Gianpaolo Zapati. Today I'm joined by Tim Diacono, and these are your 5 headlines for today. Malta goes into a quasi-lockdown following surge in COVID-19 cases. Opposition leader Bernard Gregg says Malta has lost trust in you to Prime Minister Robert Abela. Malta's 4th ITU on standby as 27 people receive intensive care. Jason McAuliffe confirms relation to suspected hitman Jamie Vella, and Pierre Portelli confirms he colluded with Jorgen Fenech. Towards the end of the show, we'll also have an exclusive interview with Executive Chairman of Air Malta, David Curmi, where we'll be discussing the future of the national airline as well as COVID-19. Tim?
Yes, so big announcement yesterday. Malta has practically gone into a quasi-lockdown. Schools have been shut. Well, they will be shut as of Monday. Childcare centres as well have been closed. Shops, gyms, pools, hairdressers, tattooists, weddings, mass, organised sports activities, all these are gone until at least the 11th of April. Meanwhile, the so-called rule of 6 limit for public gatherings has been reduced to 4. So only 4 people can now gather in public. So, and yes, this came as Malta recorded quite a huge rise in COVID-19 cases, which was 512 in a single day, the highest since last year. Now, this was coming. Obviously, the Prime Minister was facing quite immense pressure to take action, but it really just shows how how fluid the situation is, right? So it seems a bit hard to believe right now, but it was only a week ago that the Superintendent of Public Health, Shoming Gauchi, was telling the people that you can sit in restaurants, it's not a problem as long as you follow the rules. Yeah. It's not a risk, and now not only can you not sit in a restaurant, but you can't go to a gym, you can't go to a shop, and children have to take their education online.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a bit of like a deja vu, I would feel, in terms of this time last year we were in a very similar situation where we are in our first quasi-lockdown. I mean, it's worth noting that obviously this time around the reason why cases are spreading so fast is because of a UK variant, which is proven to be more contagious. Most of the cases nowadays tend to be of the UK variant, so this is why we've seen this large spike, hence the need to implement new measures as of yesterday. In my eyes, they seem necessary measures. It seems like the situation needs to be brought back under control, and at least for the next few months next month until April 11th, these measures are implemented, and hopefully by then we will have more control of it.
There's a bit of a difference, obviously, from where we were last year, in that we now have the COVID-19 vaccine, and it's going on in the background, but Malta is vaccinating people at quite a high rate. We're in the top 20 countries worldwide pro rata, and the plan has actually been accelerated, the vaccination plan, and now we're planning to vaccinate everybody who's over 60, as well as frontliners and vulnerable people by May, and the plan is to reach herd immunity by the end of September, by the end of August. So hopefully this famous herd immunity is when it's the goal, right? So that's when the virus will stop spreading, ideally in the community, because it won't find enough people it can infect.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the light at the end of the tunnel, but I mean, we have a long way to get there, it seems.
The tunnel has been shrunk.
The tunnel has been shrunk, but I mean, it's still nonetheless to say that, Abela has come under a lot of criticism, especially by opposition leader Bernard Gregg, who yesterday after the press conference said that he held his own press conference, and he said that Malta has lost trust in you, referring to Abela. Obviously, there's been a lot of talk about last year that Malta defeated the pandemic, has beaten the pandemic, and the waves are back in the sea. But now Greg is saying, the tsunami has come again, and it's swept everyone with them. Sadly, taking all of us along with Abela. And said, he's, among other things, he said Abela is taking us all for a ride. that he didn't implement enough restriction measures at the right time, and that things aren't being taken seriously. He said, and I quote, "He sowed all the seeds of arrogance and hard-headedness. He was short-sighted, made irresponsible declarations, and took wrong decisions, and now the people of Malta are paying for this." He also, when asked what he would do differently, he said, again, he mentioned that he wouldn't take world people for a ride. He would have looked at other countries and what they did with lockdowns and implemented similar strategies and taken more measures when they were needed, and been more prudent and more serious with the measures taken.
Yeah, look, I think it's a bit unfair, to be honest, as in what the Prime Minister said yesterday, and that nobody would want to be in his shoes right now. I think it's extremely accurate. Bernard Grech is saying that no other world leader made the mistakes that the Maltese Prime Minister did, which is completely wrong.
Yeah.
Every world leader has been criticized for either being too lax or even too stringent. I mean, even the Prime Minister of New Zealand has faced internal criticism for locking down her nation very early, and it's tough, for the Prime Minister, because you need to keep public morale high. That you can't keep the nation depressed. You have to lift the nation spirits a bit, but you also have to be honest with them. Constant mixed messaging at the end of the day, it's true, will ultimately harm public trust in the leader. But yes, it had to happen because the situation at the hospitals, news has been filtering out of it that it's reached quite a critical level. So there are 3 ITUs at Malta Day currently operating for COVID-19 patients. A 4th one is on standby, and there are further resources that can be utilized if needs be. However, and currently there are around 19 COVID-19 patients in ITU, and a further 9 patients who recovered from COVID-19 but who still require intensive care. Now, the numbers haven't really increased since January, but the problem is that we're talking about human beings, and it's tiring, right, for the medics dealing with them.
Absolutely. In fact, a couple of medics spoke out on social media over the past few days, saying that they're completely stretched thin, that they're going through hell, that they're appealing for people to be more responsible, especially in light of all these illegal parties and boat parties and the Tumbler event that was held. Medics and healthcare workers are appealing for people to be more responsible because the situation at hospital is turning out to be quite dire. In fact, Jeremy Camilleri, a popular TV personality, in fact, spoke this morning or last night on Lerba Foster Jimma about his father's death, and his father had spent 1 year in isolation as a precautionary measure to not get COVID-19, but after his health deteriorated, he had to go to hospital, and that's where in fact he caught COVID-19, which ultimately led to his untimely death, unfortunately. But the situation was that in hospital, people are side by side, patients are side by side, and there's a good chance that you might get infected from COVID-19. And as was the case for Jeremy's father, unfortunately, a patient nearby was tested COVID positive, resulting to him testing COVID positive, and a few weeks later he passed away. So the situation at hospital is such the case that ITU is under stress, and these measures hopefully will help relieve that. So, moving on from another story, non-COVID related, but still equally as important, one might say, is Jason McAuliffe has confirmed that he is related to the suspected hitman Jamie Vella. Jason McAuliffe, the One News chairman, confirmed yesterday that one of the men accused of the murder of Daphne Caruana Galizia is in fact his first cousin, but has insisted that he has not seen or spoken to him in many years. I believe McAuliffe also said that he's one of 35 cousins, so it's clearly a large family with a lot of connections. And then again, Malta is a small island, so one way or another you're always related to someone. So I don't think it's fair to put the 2 and 2 together and say that he should be held responsible for Jamie Vella's actions. But it's important to note out there that there is a connection between the One News chairman and the suspected murderer of Daphne Caruana Galizia. What do you think, Tim?
Well, yeah, no, you can't judge people on what their relatives do, and obviously, I have to give Jason McAuliffe the full benefit of the doubt here, but it is just needs to be noted that one of the people who have been charged with this assassination is actually related to the person in charge of the governing party's media station. Jason McAuliffe is talking about a character assassination on himself. It's a bit funny, I think, seeing as his station often conducts similar character assassination campaigns, but that's just by the by. Anyway, there's Vince Muscat, one of the other suspects who has been given a pardon to testify against Jamie Vella, will be in court today. I will be following it live, so make sure you follow lovinmalta.com for all the latest updates. And finally, the PN's former head of media, Pierre Portelli, confirmed in the public inquiry looking into the murder of Carla Galizia that he did collude, so to speak, with Jorgen Fenech to leak damaging stories about people within his party who are critical of then leader Adrian Delia. Now, these chats have been published, and he confirmed their veracity. They included damaging stories against the MEP David Curmi, the MP Chris Side, and quite shockingly also Nicky Vella de Framujo was married to the leader, and he had their own head of media secretly feeding negative stories about his leader's own wife to using Jorgen Fenech, which is a bit devious, right? It doesn't sound right at all.
No, absolutely not. But I mean, nothing about this, anything involved with to do with Jorgen Fenech sounds just quite right. And I mean, it's clear to see that the business mogul seems to have his fingers in almost every pie in Malta. And even last week it was revealed that Johan Buttigieg, the current MTA CEO, also had a close relationship with Jorgen Fenech as well. So, I mean, at this point in time, it doesn't come as a surprise to me that there was this kind of relationship between Portelli and Fenech, where they were leaking information, given that the history of Fenech and what we've seen with his close connections with political parties and people of influence. With that being said, this brings us to the end of our news segment of Lovin Daily. Make sure to stick around for our exclusive interview with David Curmi, the executive chairman of Air Malta, where, among other things, we'll be talking about the future of the nation's airline and COVID-19. But before that, here's a quick recap of Prime Minister Robert Bella discussing the new measures.
Għax is-sitwazzjoni insegwuha ġurnata b'ġurnata, il-ġimgħa li għaddiet diġà ħadna numru ta' miżuri biex naraw li l-infezzjonijiet ma jkomplux jinxterdu. Illum qed inżidu magħhom biex inkunu aktar aggressivi fid-difiża tagħna, partikolarment kontra l-varjant. Irridu nikkontrollaw id-domanda fuq l-isptar biex nibqgħu nagħtu l-aqwa kura lil kull min għandu bżonna, kif dejjem għamilna. Irridu naqsu l-infezzjonijiet biex is-sistema tas-saħħa tibqa' tlaħħaq mad-domanda li jkun hemm fuqha. Irridu nkomplu nżidu ir-rata ta' tilqim li diġà hija l-aqwa fl-Ewropa. Iffaċċjati b'realtà ġdida, id-deċiżjoni kienet li naġixxu minnu fih mingħajr ma nieħdu ebda riskji f'dan il-perjodu. Għalhekk mal-miżuri kollha li diġà ħabbarna b'effett minn għada sal-11 ta' April li ġej, jiġifieri meta jintemmu il-vaganzi tal-għid tat-tfal tal-iskola, se jingħalqu l-ħwienet li jipprovdu prodotti u servizzi meqjusa bħala mhux essenzjali. Se jingħalqu wkoll ir-ristoranti u l-faċilitajiet anċillari tal-lukandi li minn għada jistgħu jibdew joffru biss ikel u xorb permezz ta' room service jew deliveries. L-ivvjaġġar lejn Għawdex se jkun limitat biss għal raġunijiet essenzjali u għal min għandu proprjetà fil-Gżira Awċija. Il-limitu għal gruppi f'postijiet pubbliċi se jinżel minn 6 għal 4. Filwaqt li hemm u qed nagħmlu llum rakkomandazzjoni ċara sabiex in-nies ma jinġemgħux fi djar privati. Se jkun sospiż ukoll l-isport organizzat kollu. Se jingħalqu l-gyms u l-pools, se jingħalqu swali taċ-ċina mat-teatri u l-mużewijiet, se jitwaqfu t-tiġijiet u l-attivitajiet reliġjużi. Funerali jistgħu jsiru skont il-protokolli li diġà hemm fis-seħħ. Minn nhar it-tnejn se jingħalqu l-istituzzjonijiet edukattivi u l-Gvern se jkompli jaħdem mal-stakeholders kollha biex għal ftit jiem li fadal qabel il-vaganzi tal-Eid il-lezzjonijiet jingħataw online kif qed isir diġà b'mod tajjeb fl-istituzzjonijiet post-sekondarji u terzjarji.
Welcome back to Lovin Daily. With me now is David Curmi, Executive Chairman of Air Malta. Hi, Mr. Curmi. Thanks for accepting this interview.
Thank you for your invitation.
So first of all, obviously big day yesterday, the Prime Minister basically put Malta into a quasi-lockdown. Unlike the first lockdown of last year, though, the airport remains open. Do you think this was the right decision?
I think it was because for our airline to operate, we must first ensure that we have a safe country. If we don't ensure that we have a safe country, the airline can be affected in two ways. People will not come, and if the situation gets very serious, then our aircrafts will not be allowed to land in certain countries. So I think it's important that everybody follows the new measures so that we can get out of this situation as quickly as possible.
So obviously there's talks ongoing for Air Malta to receive to be allowed to receive some kind of state aid from the government. How desperate is the situation? Is it true that it has weeks to live, as some people are saying?
It's quite desperate, and there is a reason. The only shareholder, the main shareholder rather, but the biggest by far, is government in Air Malta, and because of European rules and regulations, when the state owns an entity, it cannot just provide it with funds, it cannot just provide it with cash. It has first to go through a process of approval. And this is why it is critical, because the process can take some time. Air Malta, it has been a long time since Air Malta has been sitting on significant cash reserves. And because it doesn't have cash reserves, it needs cash. And that cash can only come from our shareholder. The company is undercapitalized. The company needs an injection of capital to see it move forward. And what we have done is government, the shareholder, has engaged a team of international professionals who, together with Air Malta, in the next few weeks will be submitting a submission to the European Commission for additional funding, and we hope that the submission will be received well.
Is there any reason why it won't, though? Because the EU already approved state funding for other European airlines, so why wouldn't it for Air Malta?
I'm confident that it would. The problem we need to address in the case of Air Malta is the fact that the Commission are aware that the airline had its problems before COVID. So COVID has made these problems even more serious, and we need to convince the Commission that we will not only deal with the issues that COVID has brought along, but we will also deal with the issues that existed prior to COVID. And I think this is the most delicate point in our negotiations. That will be the most important and delicate point in our negotiations.
So if the EU says no, then Malta has to just admit that we can no longer have our own national airline then?
I hope that we will never come to that stage. My objective and my mission is to make sure that we save this airline and to make a sufficiently robust case for Malta to have its own national carrier.
Do you think that in light of COVID-19, but also more generally, do you think the EU should relax its state aid laws a bit? I mean, the likes of Air Malta are kind of held back by state aid, and they're competing against other airlines, for example, Turkish Airlines and others, which receive significant state funding, and it puts them at a disadvantage, right? So do you think the EU should be a bit less stringent?
Yes, I think there should be more understanding, particularly because the effects of the pandemic have lived far longer than everybody expected. The pandemic has actually decimated Air Malta in that our revenues have practically stopped. And when you have a lot of fixed costs to pay, but you don't have any income streams coming in, then you have a major problem because your cash dries up, and without cash you can't run a business. So we've been following the position and the attitude that the Commission has taken with some of the other European airlines, and we have seen perhaps a lot more flexibility than the Commission has shown in the past. The treaty itself, the European Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union, has some flexibility when it comes to unexpected and major events that significantly affect the economy of a country. So we're hoping that there will be this understanding. But yes, we're constantly facing competition from airlines outside the European Union who have unrestricted access to funds very often from their own states and from their own governments.
Mm-hmm. I'm just trying to say, like, why is it fair for the government to be able to fund, for example, the health system and the police, but then it can't fund its own airline?
Airlines are considered to be commercial entities, and there are other commercial airlines, purely private, some of them listed on various stock exchanges. So I think it's important that you reach a very fair and good balance between what is private and what is state.
So you mentioned this yourself initially. You said that Air Malta needs, like, the scrutiny is going to be about Air Malta's old problems as well. And in fact, there's a lot of talk about a new strategy for Air Malta and a new direction overall. Does this mean that it's going to have to shrink even more before it can start growing again?
I think Air Malta needs to right size, given the size of its operations, given the fact that it only has 8 aircrafts. The structure that Air Malta has is much larger than it actually requires. So at some stage, yes, we need to right size. We need to change most of our fixed costs into variable costs. At the moment, whether we fly or not, we have a lot of costs to pay, and we still carry those costs even though we don't operate. What I'm trying to do as much as possible is to transfer a lot of those fixed costs into variable costs, which means if we fly, we pay; if we don't fly, we don't pay. To do that, obviously, you need to outsource certain services that the company currently has in-house. And yes, we need to shrink. Basically, we need to come down to the right size so that we can make this airline sustainable and less dependent on its shareholder for continuous funding.
Mm-hmm. And does the shrinking mean that more pilots and more people will lose their jobs as well?
I think what will happen is that Air Malta will end up buying the services rather than keeping the services on its own payroll. Air Malta already has a very, very high payroll. Our payroll is about 50 million per annum, which for the size of the operation that it is, that is considered to be very high. So, for example, if we have ground operations people, we could consider hiving that off into a separate company and buying that service as and when we require. So we're working on these ideas. As much as possible, we don't want to see people losing jobs. That's never a good idea. It's just finding the right formula. So some of the measures are going to obviously be imposed by the Commission. One thing we should not expect is the Commission to just give us a blank check and tell us, fine, government can give you money and you can do whatever you want with it. That is not going to happen. That it has to be clear. So some of the measures we're going to have to take are going to be conditional on the funding.
So talking like workers being moved to another company and then Air Malta will tap into this company.
It's what other airlines have done. So it's not. This is not particular to Air Malta. Most of the airlines today do not do certain operations themselves, but they farm them out. They outsource them.
And the conditions will remain the same, though.
Well, that I think it's premature to say whether they will.
Okay. And in terms of routes, of flight routes, can we expect to see a permanent reduction in them?
Look, on the routes, the network is critical for an airline. It can make you or break you. Routes are very expensive. We have already decided to cut 10 destinations, but these were really destinations that were not profitable for the airline, and they were marginal destinations. They were more destinations for outbound
Which ones?
passengers.
Which ones are they?
They're destinations such as Malaga, we've stopped, Ibiza, we've stopped, Venice, we've stopped, Bucharest, we've stopped, St. Petersburg, we've stopped. These weren't very profitable routes. So the new strategy that we have in mind is for Air Malta to continue to be a point-to-point airline. Air Malta has the advantage that it can land in the major European cities and in major European airports, and it has very good slots. And we would like to leverage on that asset by continuing to connect Malta to these major cities and major airports, but increase the density, the frequency of the flights, so that hopefully we can also get more passengers and more tourists back into Malta.
So more focus on the likes of Heathrow and...
Yes, we're focusing mainly on France, Italy, the UK, Germany, and we're starting a new service, hopefully, to Spain as well, to Madrid.
Okay. So what do you expect to see? Obviously, it's a bit... no one really knows what's going to happen, but what do you think is going to happen to the travel industry post-COVID? Do you expect to see a boom in demand because of a global pent-up desire to travel after spending a year indoors, or do you think people are going to be more cautious?
From the information we are receiving from various international bodies, it appears that clearly there is going to be a very big demand for travel. People want to travel. There's this big urge for people to travel. The information that we currently have is that people are likely to travel closer to home for shorter periods. So this is where I think Air Malta can play a very important role. We're strategizing our network so that people can go on short holidays, long weekends, come back, but increase their frequency of travel. This is, I think, how travel is going to develop. We're going to see less business travel, but more pleasure travel. To countries closer to home and for shorter periods.
So when you talk about, so you think like you may have to make sure you have flights on Friday and then...
Or Thursday perhaps.
Or Thursday and then
then returning on Sunday or Monday.
Okay, so this is what you're working on for the summer?
This is what we're working on. If things improve, of course, and we're not constrained to continue to limit our flights.
Do you think any changes to the industry are going to become permanent, that the changes induced by COVID-19?
Yes, I think some airlines have already taken like permanent decisions of stopping certain long-haul routes. Certain airlines have pulled out of long-haul routes. Certain airlines have stopped flying to certain destinations, to certain routes. I think every airline is going to have to be a lot more cost conscious than it ever was, because routes are very expensive for an airline.
And Malta was planning its own long-term routes until recently. They're planning to fly to New York, to Ghana, to Mumbai. Does that still on, or it's completely scrapped?
No. That strategy has stopped. We have stopped it. We have no plans of traveling long haul, but what we want to do is enable our passengers to connect to long haul routes from major airports. So it doesn't make sense for Air Malta to fly to, for example, New York at the moment, when we can catch a New York flight from Malpensa in Milan, for example. So we take you there at the right time and with the right connectivity, but long-haul routes require an investment, which Air Malta is not and doesn't have the cash to do for the moment.
And finally, obviously there is a pent-up desire to travel, I understand this, but there's obviously also going to be a kind of caution, because in the sense that people don't know, there were a lot of horror stories of people who went on holiday, and while they were there the country went into lockdown, all of a sudden they were trapped there, and no one helped them out. So there is this element of fear as well, that you don't know what's going to happen to the country you're staying in. How can Air Malta plan to bring back some kind of confidence in this scenario, even in terms of cancellations of flights or refunds?
Okay. First of all, on safety during travel, Air Malta can't do anything on its own. This has to be a concerted effort, in my opinion, on the part of hopefully the European Union. We need uniformity, we need standardization, we need to use technology so that people feel comfortable to travel. If people are not going to feel comfortable to travel because it's either very bureaucratic or unsafe, then people won't travel. What is unfortunately happening, there seems to be too many initiatives by either individual countries or international bodies to do their own thing with travel IDs and travel passes and travel certificates. This is not going to work because it's going to be very complex. Even the time you need to go through the process can be complex.
The so-called vaccine passports.
Yes, so I think for one, Europe should have a standard, a uniform system. Ideally, it should be technology based and not paper based, because people don't like these kind of barriers when it comes to travel. On the refund side, I think Air Malta has been very good in handling flight cancellations. Air Malta had to cancel, unfortunately, 8,500 flights. It received 150,000 requests for refunds. We have paid over 22 million in refunds. We have issued 70,000 vouchers, travel vouchers, and we have rebooked some people on alternative flight arrangements. So I think this is a very big plus for Air Malta. Most of our revenue for 2020 has gone out in refunds, if not all. We are committed to continue to ensure that our very loyal passengers, and even those who perhaps do not travel with Air Malta very frequently, get the service they deserve.
Finally, what do you think Malta's tourism industry is going to look like next year? Not this summer, the one after, 2022.
I think the summer is very much going to be, unfortunately, a lost summer. Hopefully, we will see the numbers increasing after the vaccination process. I think summer in 2022 is definitely not going to be the same as 2019. I think we would be looking more at 2023 perhaps as the year of a recovery, of a main recovery in tourism. So far, this is how it's shaping. Perhaps things could change, but so far, I think this is what is likely to happen.
David Curmi, thank you very much. Thank you very much for sticking with us on Lovin Daily. Make sure you follow lovinmalta.com for all the latest updates on what's happening in this country. And until we meet again, have a day full of lovin'.